First question.
First question.
Let's go.
Let's go.
My friend Jail Johnson. Curious what tactics you have if someone doesn't have a great personality but still wants to podcast, but with her caveat of, and yes, I have a personality. This isn't about me.
Didn't want to out herself as not having a personality. Can't blame her for that.
I can't blame her. Yeah, this is a good one. This one's not an easy one.
But what do we really think like a personality is, or when she's saying like a great personality, what would be a great personality?
That's
or how
what I'm
that
saying.
translate in a podcast to make, I guess what she's asking, great content, right?
Yes.
That converts, that people are going to want to watch and they're entertained by to some degree.
Well, we have to caveat with that's subjective, right? Like great personality is subjective. Like us as coaches don't go to somebody and we go, your personality is great, yours sucks, yours is good. That's not that. Our process is not, honestly, I think as we've continued on, been less, as we go, less about trying to like analyze your personality in terms of like our own subjective view of it, right? What we want to do is take the personality you already have that you've spent 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years cultivating and find a podcast medium that it fits into. And that's what we do. So it's definitely more objective. But in terms of, okay, somebody doesn't have a great personality but still wants the podcast, my quick answer is, okay, we'll find a format that will work for them. It's not like it's not a one size fits all.
Absolutely. And when you think, I'm going to read into this a little bit. And what I'm thinking the Jail is talking about is, great personality. You're talking about somebody that maybe is an experienced public speaker that has time, that they've been on camera, that they're used to being on camera, that they don't feel, withdrawn from that. Or, maybe they're just an entrepreneur or somebody that is, even in my case, right, where you've been the front end, you've been somebody that's been handling the marketing, all of that. So, you've got a little bit of that trepidation about getting in front of the camera. It's not that you're ill-equipped for it, but that, like, you don't really have the experience for it. So I think that's really what she's talking about when she's saying, like, having a great personality. Okay. It's not like, there's great or bad personalities, right?
Okay, so imagine, you're not the front-end person. You're not the salesman. Maybe you're not even... You could be a marketer, right? But maybe you're the operational. You know how to get the leads, but you're not necessarily the one closing them. You're not that outgoing front man of the band. Then what would you say to that type of person in terms of like what would you do with them when it comes to a podcast, formats that work for them, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's me, So like if you look at our partnership, like that's why I like this question so much, is because it represents a lot of our partnership, is that you are, you're the personality of it. Not that my personality is absent or non-existent, right?
It's absolutely terrible.
You're willing to put yourself out there, but really the thing is, I think that separates it is that you don't feel the expense for it. And when we talk to a lot of our clients about promotion, we talk about the appetite for promotion, so is it going to be something that's going to be a big expense to you to talk about a project that's very personal to you, that you spent money on, that you spend time on, that you spend effort on?
Yes.
Which sucks, right? That's like a terrible position to be in. But at the same time, we have clients like Jesse Fuchsia or Shelby Claymon that are very, very promotionally hungry, and they're willing to take every little bit of the process and say, this is going to be content. And that's what really translates more so into results. So I think that's really like when we're talking about a great personality, it's really, do you have the appetite? I'm not going to say the energy or the wherewithal to promote, but I'm going to say the appetite for it. Are you able to hang? Are you able to hang with the expense of like, are you able to go over that feeling of, am I annoying people? Is this too much?
Yes.
Is this project worth it? Like, we need to put all those things to the side, and we need to start getting excited about what we're putting time, money, and effort into.
Mic drop. That's it, man. Perfect.
It's a mic drop right there.
And we're going a little bit quicker than last episode.
Ellen DeGeneres dancing right through the crowd.
Move. What should we give away? We can't. I mean, we're not at the cars.
A new car.
Dude, a Hyundai Sonata. All right. They look pretty good.
I would love a Hyundai Sonata.
Dude, honestly, Hyundai has stepped it up.
My girlfriend would love a Hyundai Sonata. That's such a
Dude, we had a Hyundai
car.
Sonata with 260,000 miles on it.
260,000 miles?
Yeah, man. It standed the test of time, truly.
That's a crazy amount. Like usually
I know.
anything north of 200,000 is pretty miraculous.
I'm at 230 with the Honda, baby. We're cooking.
So it's like Honda, Subaru, all those guys are kind of good
they
for
can
longevity.
They're all very much in that department of like, if you're on like a Facebook page and you don't have like 200,000, they don't even they're like, nah, like we don't even respect that.
We don't even respect that.
Nope.
And you know, I mean, similarly, if you haven't gone north of 20 episodes in your podcast, we don't respect that. We don't respect.
Next question. You want to hit Carol's question, Jack?
How about the situation when an entrepreneur's strengths are nowhere close to doing podcasts? Should it be pursued anyway? So we're thinking again, these last three things. Do I have experience talking to an audience in front of people? Do I have experience in front of the camera? Am I sort of a front-end person, or is this very new for me?
Yes.
That's what we're talking about.
I like
Not something that's written in stone of I can't do this and I've got to make it work and I'm going to be an ogre that's, you know, stumbling through a podcast. This is a muscle to be developed, similar to anything else that you would do with weight training.
Yep, and let's go to the famous examples. Your Lex Friedmans, your Andrew Hubermans. These are people who I'm not watching them because I can't wait to experience their exuberant personality.
Especially Lex Friedman. That's the controversial.
Boom. Yeah, you got a little. I'm gonna cut you off, dude. I'm gonna cut you off. But also, this is actually.
He sleeps in that suit.
He lives in the suit. He plays guitar in the suit. he's in the lab in the suit. So I think I didn't want to go too crazy down the introvert extrovert rabbit hole when it comes to podcasting, but I just think this is a good question for it. I've heard people say that introverts are better salespeople. I think there's an argument to be made on both sides of that, but I will say that
as the extrovert.
Anyway, I gotta hold myself back.
Continue.
In terms of the sales thing, they'll say that because introverts will typically be better listeners than they are talkers. And in terms of the split, it's that they will talk less and they are better at listening than, say, an extrovert, right? And for, say, an interview podcast, I'm an extrovert. I've had interviews where the comment section was just like, why didn't you let this person talk? Meaning the comments were saying to me, people were saying to me, why didn't you let the guest talk? And that's something that extroverts find themselves doing. And that's the thing you have to think about with an interview show, not to go off too far on the side, but it's like, hey, you're probably not going to talk that much. That's why we're going to have this. That's why you have to make sure it's going to be right for you. So in terms of like, okay, an entrepreneur's strengths are nowhere close to podcasting. Well, there's no one size fits all, right? So there's podcasts that are designed for introverts to thrive. But how do you get a podcast that's designed for an introvert to thrive? You have to design it. You can't just go and see a YouTuber or a podcaster or your favorite content creator do a thing, or a LinkedIn influencer do a thing and go, oh, I'm just going to do that. That's how you do something that doesn't work for you. So if you're going to do a solo podcast episode when you're literally staring the camera in the eye, like looking at the camera, okay, maybe an extrovert would naturally be better for that. If you're going to do one where you're doing an interview show where the point is that you don't talk, you just ask the right questions, maybe an introvert would be better for that. But regardless, if you're starting from scratch, you're probably going to be still going to be a little nervous, still going to be a little awkward. And that's going to be for an introvert, for an extrovert, for a seasoned public speaker, for a back-end operator. You're starting something new regardless. So that was a little bit too long of a tangent, but
no, absolutely. Everybody that even the people that are super, super far along, right, that are really, really great fits for podcasts, that have a lot to say, that have, a lot that you could say charisma, still need a couple episodes to kind of get up to speed. So to piggyback off of what you were saying, it is a different thing between what you and I were talking about before this episode and what we actually talk about now.
Yeah.
You could maybe compare it to like an ESPN broadcast or something like that, like being on, like welcome to, the New Year's Eve parade, like there's a different framing that comes over it.
Yep.
So even if you are really up to date with that and you're somebody that's not trying to catch up, there's still going to be a little bit of that acclimation period.
Yes.
more
No matter
or
if you're
less.
introvert, extrovert, if it's like.
But if you're, and the good news is too, is that, if you're not good at it, like really, like a lot of it, and you and I have even gotten this too, and I feel like a lot of the people too, like if you're B2B, right, if you're a coach, if you've talking to people a lot on discovery calls or coaching calls, you're going to be able to talk about the ideas that you would be talking, or the content that you would be talking about in your podcast. Otherwise, you'd be able to rattle off. For us with podcasting, whether you're talking about distribution or editing, whatever it could be, somebody could put us on a stretching board and give us questions.
100%.
And we could talk for 10 or 15 minutes, right? So, if you're a coach or somebody that has a B2B, business, right? Like this is something that you're already good at talking about, and it's really just tapping into that and feeling comfortable about it.
Yes, 100%. And I have done I'm just going to wing it before. And I totally get that because like I've been in that position. But the thing that doing the upfront work does is it allows you to kind of skip a lot of that, where we just figure out how do we set this thing up so then you're only just talking about the stuff that is second nature to you,
Yeah, absolutely. And even to almost contradict like my original point, right, is that, you and I can have, maybe we can go into a video and have like 2 or 3 topics that we want to talk about, but we can get really further off from that too. So like just a little bit of that, preparation, just a little bit of forethought with that can really clear up a lot of that content, make it easier for your audience.
Yeah. And that's what we do. That's why we do strategy first. Like that's it. We do not work.
And strategy's not complex. Like that's the thing.
No.
Like
it's a system.
It could be, strategy could be 3 or 4 bullet points for this video. And that's really similar to what Ryan and I did for this, especially when it comes to these questions. So that's what we mean by that. It's not something that you have to sit down for 2-3 hours and really, iron everything out. It could be something super simple.
Yeah,
we're just talking about thinking it before you do, thinking about it before you do it. Yeah, that's really what it is.
And my point is not skipping it. That's all. Like now, if you do it with us, you're gonna get a way different experience than if you just
even
do
if
it
it's
at
a couple
home,
minutes. Don't skip it. Just think about 3 broad topics that you want to talk about rather than podcasting at large, because.
That's too intimidating too.
That 47-minute episode is not going to go. It's going to be too. Yeah. So, and even when you and I have recorded stuff, you need to nail stuff down. You need to have flow, because you and I can get into.
I was going to say
similar to with the guests. Yeah, you can get into rabbit holes.
Boom. We were going to do 5 questions. We're going to do 3. So this is going to be our last one. But there you go. So we're doing 3. Because 5 is going to be a 38-minute episode. 3 is going to be
and here we are breaking our own
episode.
Rules, because we have enough to say about
There you go. You got to adapt to. But that's why we do this format, right? Because we can just go and go and go. Okay, so I'll read Alex's question. Also, shout out to Alex because he asks a question on almost every post.
Shout out to Alex.
Shout out to Alex. Do you think focusing too much on guest quality over content value is a major pitfall too? How do you balance it at your agency?
You want to go first, buddy?
Yeah, I'll go. So I think I really like your answer to this better, but I'll try to like set you up, which is like what he's asking is focusing too much on that maybe this guest is going to save you, or this guest is going to drive the whole thing, or this guest, honestly, I have an expectation for this guest to do something for me, versus just creating a concept and a strategy where every guest hopefully gets you essentially the content that you want, right? So that's just what I'm gathering from this question.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about this a little bit before this video too. I mean, when you talk about the spectrum of celebrity, it is very, 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 very large. I mean, if we're talking about movie actors, TV actors, athletes, all this sort of stuff, right? So you can really club your audience over the head with, like I said, this is former New England running back James White is going to sit down and talk about real estate investing. There's going to be some New England Patriot fans that are going to recognize that name, but you're talking about like when you really try to ratchet it up in terms of the accolades for the guests, who they are, their profile. It's not going to lead. It's not going to lead anywhere, because at the end of the day, and you and I have talked about this a lot. You're competing against Netflix. You're competing against Hulu. You're competing against Amazon, HBO, all this crazy entertainment, and podcasts that are better than yours as well, you know? So I get where people come from when they think that I need to make the guest really, really undeniable, or maybe if I can sort of piggyback off the cloud of that guest, this would be a good way to go. But you know, you can have somebody that's very, 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 very qualified.
Yes.
But if they can't communicate in a way that's riveting, or maybe if they're not funny, or maybe, you know, there's a bunch of other things that come into, like what we were talking about before with personality, that affects the guest quality in terms of how it's consumed. You know, so, okay, if your guest is Brad Pitt, that's a different story. But if your guest is somebody that, you know, worked with Brad Pitt and, you know, the connection's kind of tenuous, I would still be more concerned in terms of how the guest sounds, how they communicate, you know, what's your rapport, how are they on camera,
also
all this other stuff
accolades.
Before the accolades and the achievements is what I'm saying. That's the headline there.
Yes. Yeah, because what you said before was like, and also every podcast intro is, we're having on James Smith. James has worked, he's an ex-Microsoft, then transitioned to Meta. He's now been with Meta for 4 years. He worked on the AI team, designing the, who cares? Like, that's not why people are there.
He worked on Daryl, AI, iRobot, multiple Spielberg
the movie
films.
Her.
And no, but that, and it's not saying that that isn't impressive. It's like, it's this weird double thing where it's like, you could do all that, where it's like, oh, that's awesome. Like, he did all the technical effects on, you know what I'm saying?
That guy could be the man, but that's not telling me, that doesn't tell me if he's the man
no,
or
exactly,
not.
yeah. And even, okay, so even if, let's say you get like the guy, you know, the stunt coordinator for the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, and you get all these Lord of the Rings, and it's, you know, maybe a business or a management podcast or something like that. Maybe you get some Lord of the Rings people in there, but they're not going to stay.
No, but for a Lord of the Rings podcast, that's one of the best episodes.
Yeah, but if
Context,
you're, you know,
Context.
if your co-host is Viggo Mortensen, you know, or Ian McKellen, that's a different story.
100%,
But for that, like, so again, the headline with this, to kind of clear it all up, is that you see, we see a lot of people that we work with sort of lusting over getting their guest quality to be accolades, achievements, you know. Is it a New York Times bestseller? Have they been in a movie that you recognize?
It's important. It's not
Have
that
they
it's
worked
not.
with names you recognize, right? And I think really at our level, where we're making content one by one, and we're really trying to just gather people one by one and build audiences that have quality and not quantity.
Yes.
You need to really focus on what the guest brings to the table to the audience, rather than, you know, is this going to be impressive at first glance?
Yes. Yeah, and I'll say a couple things.
Sorry, I spoke a lot, by the way.
No, that's great. No, this is great. But I'll say, so, because I think I try to tie it back to my experience too, if I can, which is on my podcast, on, you know, Bobcast, my former podcast that I had, I had people, high-level people with HBO documentaries and, you know, multi-platinum artists and all this cool stuff. And it was pretty easy to access them. Like, you just have a really good email and you find a manager's email. And it's not like everybody's busy 100% of the time. That doesn't mean it's going to be a great episode.
Yeah.
And so on one side, getting bigger, higher level people is actually probably not as hard as you think. But on the other side, it's also not going to do everything you think it's going to do for you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this double-edged sword. And I'll just say, you know, to cap it off, which is, have guests that are right for your podcast and your audience.
Exactly.
If you have a sliver of an idea of the type of people that listen to this, right? Like, I probably wouldn't have, I used to have a hip hop podcast. On this B2B podcast about content, I'm probably not going to have a kind of under the radar hip hop artist on it, right? It's like, now I might love that episode, but I have to look objectively at my audience. And this is something we do with clients all the time, which is we look and we go, hey, which of these guests maybe led to more business? Or which of these guests shared the episode? All of these other, like, certain, you know, small actions, right? Being the things that you can use to judge your results, rather than just, wow, look at those accolades that are so cool.
Yeah, and this isn't to say too, like, you know, if we use the example of like Elena Ciccatelli, right, that's in the electronic vehicle space, she can get people that are involved, you know, maybe with Tesla or something like that, or, you know, I'm sounding stupid right now,
whatever,
right? But like anybody that's involved with developing these electronic vehicles or developing this sort of technology, that is good,
Yes.
right? Because we're getting the guest quality is hit and the content value is hit as well, because we want people that are at the nice edge in terms of that technology, right? But, sometimes, like what we're talking about is you get caught up in I want to make it like Joe Rogan, where I want it to be educational. I want it to get me money.
that was me,
I want it
too.
to get me viewership, audience, size, and all of that.
Yes.
But at the same time, I want to have really cool guests on, and I want to be able to cuss, and I want to be able to talk really loose and kind of just hang out, which is nirvana. I mean, we're with you. Like, we're with you. I mean, that was what you created with the Ryan Sullivan show, which was formerly Bobcast, right? Like, that's what it was. And a lot of the people that we talk to, it's nothing that we fault anybody for, but yeah, that's driven by guest quality. Yes, by Joe Rogan, but the guest quality is why, Cat Williams is in the news and he sits down with Joe Rogan, and I don't mind Joe Rogan, so I'll watch that. But I'm not a Joe Rogan fan. But that's where you get that mixture of like, okay, there's something that's relevant. His podcast is big enough that they'll go on that podcast, and then I'll go see it. When you're talking about indie creators, people that are very independent, that are very niche, that are maybe just starting out, that are doing some B2B thing, that have an angle to it, we can't look towards comedy podcasts. We can't look towards those very, very vanity driven accolades. That's where we need to go into, okay, I do an EV podcast, so I need to try to get people that okay,
and
maybe
literally
a
Elena's the
title
perfect
within
example.
that industry.
All
that's hot
she
shit.
does is that. Like, she has only industry
so
people.
if it's
right?
within the industry, that's cool.
Yes.
Like if you're talking about smartphones and Steve Jobs is still alive and you can sit down with Steve Jobs, it's like, okay,
Great.
well, great guest profile, obviously, but at the same time, he's going to be able to talk about smartphones and implementation and all this other stuff that's going to be worthwhile to your audience. It's just getting caught in that rabbit hole with the guest quality of just sort of having fame or just sort of having a Liver King, right? If you sat down with Liver King, would that really serve our podcast audience? Not really. But if you posted it on LinkedIn, it would get you'd be able to piggyback off of his
there's
clout.
nothing stopping you from starting your own little side YouTube channel and just doing 3 interviews a year with people that you just ended up landing. But I saw a guy, he put the interview on a Google Drive link. Like, he didn't even put it on Spotify. And it's like, maybe he just wanted to do that interview, and he's just like, here it is for whoever is around. It's like, I'm not going to tell you that's not a strategy, but I'm not going to tell you not to do it.
Exactly. But you need that strategy behind it, and that's what we're saying is just have that guest quality to really walk hand in hand with the content value as well, and not just have that notoriety of I recognize this guy, and that's why I'm clicking play. And again, just to close this out, okay, so you may miss out on those people that don't click play because they recognize that guy's name, but you don't want those people, right? You don't want that muddling up the numbers where, there's one time that I get Ben Affleck to sit down on the Ryan Sullivan podcast show, and now I'm looking at these analytics that don't represent my own fandom or my own audience, right? So there's some detriment a little bit with that
inflation.
too.
It's
like
inflated.
You can't judge really what your own interest or your own draw is,
True. Yeah, you don't want to get too caught up in that mire, and then now all you're doing is adapting to like try to replicate one episode that got your most downloads rather than
couldn't say better
sticking to your strategy. And hey, we got to stop there because this shit could go all day, man.
Absolutely. Let's stop right here.
Appreciate you, Jack. This is cool, man.
Absolutely, dude, because I got to take a piss.
All right, perfect. Well, appreciate you guys for tuning in. You know the deal. Ryan Sullivan Show, Podcast Principles. Catch you next week.